To understand who we are, we must first look back at where we came from. Our story doesn't begin with cities or writing, but in the deep silence of a primordial world where the only law was survival. For millions of years, the stage was being set for the most unlikely of protagonists, us.
Around 6 million years ago, a split occurred in the evolutionary tree of primates. One branch stayed in the trees, destined to remain apes, while the other ventured onto the dangerous open grasslands. These early hominids stood upright, freeing their hands, a small change that would eventually alter the fate of the entire planet.
For eons, these early ancestors lived much like other animals, vulnerable and exposed. But then, Homo erectus tamed a force of nature that no other creature dared to touch: fire. This was our first true technology, providing warmth, protection from predators, and a way to cook food, which fueled our growing brains. With fire and crude stone tools, we were no longer just prey. Around 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens emerged, anatomically modern humans. We possessed something new, the ability to think abstractly, to plan for the future, and to communicate complex ideas through language. Driven by curiosity or necessity, small bands of humans began to leave Africa roughly 70,000 years ago. They crossed arid deserts and frozen tundras, adapting to every environment they encountered. This great migration was the ultimate test of human resilience, spreading our species to every corner of the globe. During the last ice age, we shared the planet with other human species, like the Neanderthals. But as the climate shifted and competition for resources grew fierce, we survived while they faded into extinction. By 10,000 years ago, Homo sapiens stood alone as the last human species on Earth. Then came the most radical shift in our history, the agricultural revolution. We stopped wandering and started planting, trading the freedom of the hunter-gatherer for the security of the harvest. We domesticated wild grasses into wheat and barley, and wolves into dogs, forever changing the landscape. Farming allowed populations to explode, leading to the first permanent settlements like Jericho and Çatalhöyük. But living in close quarters brought new challenges: disease, hierarchy, and the need for order. To manage these growing communities, we invented new social structures and the concept of property. In the Fertile Crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the first true civilization rose, Sumer. Here, humanity built the first cities, organized religion, and monumental architecture. It was a time of rapid innovation, where the foundations of modern society were laid in mud, brick, and stone. To keep track of grain, taxes, and trade, the Sumerians invented writing, cuneiform. For the first time, human knowledge could be stored outside the brain and passed down across generations. History effectively begins here, as we started recording our own story. While Mesopotamia built cities, another great civilization emerged along the Nile. Ancient Egypt, protected by deserts and fed by the river's annual flood, created a culture of stability and eternity. Their pharaohs were living gods who commanded the construction of pyramids that still defy explanation today. Further east, the Indus Valley civilization built planned cities with sewage systems that wouldn't be matched for thousands of years. Meanwhile, in China, the first dynasties were forming along the Yellow River, developing a culture centered on ancestor worship and the mandate of heaven. This era, the Bronze Age, was a time of interconnected trade and diplomacy. But around 1200 BC, it all came crashing down. The Bronze Age collapse saw empires vanish, cities burn, and writing disappear in many places. It was a dark age that forced humanity to rebuild from the ashes.
Out of the darkness came the Iron Age. New powers emerged, including the Phoenicians, who gave us the alphabet, and the Persians, who built the first true superpower empire. But in a small, rocky peninsula, a collection of city-states was conducting a radical experiment called democracy. Ancient Greece laid the bedrock of Western philosophy, art, and science. Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle asked questions that we're still trying to answer. Their culture was spread across the known world by Alexander the Great, whose conquests blended East and West into the Hellenistic Age. As Greece faded, Rome rose. What began as a small republic became a colossal empire, engineering roads, aqueducts, and laws that bound millions of people together. The Pax Romana brought relative peace, but it was maintained by the iron fist of the legions and the blood of the arena. While Rome ruled the West, the Han dynasty unified the East. China established the Silk Road, a vast network of trade routes that connected the Pacific to the Mediterranean. Silk, spices, and ideas flowed across continents, weaving the first threads of globalization. In the burgeoning Roman province of Judea, a preacher named Jesus sparked a movement that would transform into Christianity. Initially persecuted, this faith eventually conquered the empire itself. But Rome's political power was waning, and by the 5th century, the Western Empire collapsed under the weight of invasions. As Europe fractured into feudal kingdoms, a new light rose in the deserts of Arabia. The Prophet Muhammad united the tribes under Islam, launching a golden age of science, mathematics, and medicine. While Europe slept in the so-called Dark Ages, Baghdad became the world's center of learning. Further east, the Tang and Song dynasties in China were inventing gunpowder, the compass, and printing, technologies that would one day reshape the world. Meanwhile, in the Americas, the Maya were charting the stars and building massive stone temples in the rainforest, completely isolated from the Old World. The 13th century brought the Mongols, horsemen who carved out the largest contiguous land empire in history. They were brutal conquerors, yet their Pax Mongolica revitalized the Silk Road. But this connectivity came at a price: the Black Death, which killed nearly half of Europe's population. Europe emerged from the plague transformed. The scarcity of labor ended serfdom, and a rediscovery of classical knowledge sparked the Renaissance. Art, science, and humanism flourished in Italy, challenging the absolute authority of the Church and placing humanity at the center of the universe. In 1453, the Ottomans captured Constantinople, severing the trade routes to the east. Desperate for spices, European explorers took to the seas. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed west and accidentally connected two worlds that had been separated for millennia. This encounter led to the Columbian Exchange, a massive transfer of plants, animals, and diseases. While potatoes and corn fed the world, smallpox decimated the indigenous populations of the Americas, allowing European powers to colonize entire continents and build empires on a global scale. The influx of wealth and the spread of the printing press fueled the Reformation and the scientific revolution. Figures like Galileo and Newton shattered ancient dogmas, proving that the universe was governed not by mysticism, but by mathematical laws that could be understood. These ideas culminated in the Enlightenment, which argued for liberty, reason, and the rights of man. These philosophies ignited revolutions in America, France, and Haiti, toppling monarchies and establishing the radical idea that governments derive their power from the people. While political revolutions changed borders, the Industrial Revolution changed daily life. The steam engine replaced muscle with machine, drawing millions into factories.
Cities blackened with coal smoke, and the pace of life accelerated faster than ever before.
The 19th century saw the rapid expansion of empires and the forced migration of millions through the slave trade, a deep scar on human history. Yet it also brought the telegraph, electricity, and the realization that all life is connected through evolution, as proposed by Charles Darwin.
The 20th century opened with the promise of flight, but descended into the horror of World War I. Industrial technology was applied to killing, resulting in trench warfare and millions of deaths. It was a war that destroyed empires and redrew the map of the world. An uneasy peace was followed by the Great Depression and the rise of totalitarian regimes. World War II unleashed devastation on a planetary scale, from the Holocaust to the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Humanity had invented the means to destroy itself.
Out of the ashes, the world split into two camps, the capitalist West and the communist East. The Cold War was a battle of ideologies, fought through proxy wars, espionage, and a nuclear arms race. Yet this competition also drove us to the stars, landing a man on the moon in 1969.
The late 20th century saw the fall of the Berlin Wall and the rise of the information age. Computers shrank from room-sized machines to pocket-sized devices. The Internet connected the human hive mind, democratizing information and accelerating globalization at a breakneck speed. Today, we stand at a precipice. We have decoded the human genome, created artificial intelligence, and lifted billions out of poverty. But we also face existential threats: climate change, pandemics, and the ethical dilemmas of our own creations. The story of humanity is one of overcoming impossible odds, from a few wanderers on the African savanna to a civilization reaching for Mars. We are defined by our curiosity and our resilience. The past is written, but the next chapter of history is ours to write.